So I got to tell you something. I don't know a whole heck of a lot about motorcycle racing. I mean, sure, almost everybody probably knows names like Valentino Rossi or Freddie Spencer and Kenny Roberts, but anything beyond that, I'm kind of embarrassed to say I don't know much. So what better way to learn than to see it up close and personal? We're heading to Circuit of the Americas, better known as COTA, in Austin, Texas, to check out the only MotoGP race held in the US. And we're excited to take you with us, because we're not just going to the race. No, we're going to go behind the scenes to talk to 4 completely different people to see how they make it all happen. And you'll find out who they are a little later. But for now, this is MotoGP at Circuit of the Americas. I'm your host, Mark Long, and you're listening to Driven to Ride. So imagine being at a huge international airport with armies of people from all over the world running around. Maybe you hear swearing in English, then Italian, and then Spanish all at the same time. And then you talk to someone in perfect English who then turns around and speaks to someone else in native Spanish. That's kind of what being at MotoGP is like. But instead of hearing planes taking off and landing, you were treated to those sweet sounds from all kinds of race teams. Yamahas, Ducatis, Aprilias, Hondas, KTMs, whether it's the 250s in Moto3, the 765 Triumph Triples in Moto2, or the 1000cc monsters in MotoGP. It's equal parts exciting and overwhelming. With practice laps, qualifying for grid positions, and then, the actual races, you hardly notice when racers like Marc Marquez or Joe Roberts walk by in full leathers, or some other motorcycle legend like the aforementioned Freddie Spencer, or Kenny Roberts for that matter. Yeah, they were there too, and I unknowingly walked right past them. It's like a sensory overload, but in the best way possible. And if you take a step back and think about how all these races happen, it's kind of almost too difficult to wrap your head around. So we talked to Beth Miller, who basically runs the whole show.
So my title it's called the Clerk of the Course. And the easiest way for me to explain it is I'm the mayor of a small village with lots and lots of really good department heads. So you can imagine as MotoGP travels around the world, they don't send somebody to all the different venues that they're going to be racing at to put all the pieces in place that need to happen on a weekend. So each racetrack has a title called Clerk of the Course, and it's their job to be the mayor of their own small village for the weekend and coordinate the many things that have to happen around the venue to pull off a race of that magnitude. So
you're basically in charge of everything.
Right. Nobody calls the mayor to say that everything is okie dokie. So my job is if first of all to assist in all the pre-planning so we don't run into any issues.
Right.
But then also when that phone call comes, when there's, let's say, I know last year we had an issue with the air compressor in the main garages there where MotoGP is. So my job is to turn to my track representative, and he knows the right guy to call to get over there and take a look at the air compressor. So that's what I head up.
Gotcha. Well, how did you get involved in being the clerk of the course? How did you get started? How long you been doing that? Because I can't imagine that's something you can just jump right into.
So, I started out as a track marshal at our local motorcycle club racing up in Brainerd, Minnesota. And I started out up there and I worked my way up in the organization there. And then at the same time, I would go and I would work some of the national events. So the AMA road racing events. And they noticed that I was coming to the races, and I got a phone call one winter and they asked me if I would come in and work in the pit and on the grid for them. And they saw my work there, and then they asked me I started out as a deputy clerk of the course.
Okay.
So that would be doing all the little things that, because the clerk of the course has to be in race control during any on-track activity. the person to run and deliver things or talk to face with people. Those types of things is what I did. In order to be clerk of the course, there is some licensing that's involved.
Okay.
And so through the FIM, the AMA asked me if I would go take the classes to become licensed, so I could be clerk of the course. So not only to be clerk of the course for MotoGP, but to be clerk of the course for World Superbike or the Endurance Series, any of the other slots there that we take care of with the FIM. When you see motocross or that type of thing, there is a clerk of the course, and you have to have a special license to do what we do.
So you mentioned the clerk of the course. You're working with teams in race control. Can you tell me what race control is? Where are you guys kind of located during the races?
So at COTA, we're located in the building where all the garages are that the teams are using, and we're in a rather large room with a whole bunch of video monitors, and in that room is where race direction is, and so we have principals. We have the race director, who's Mike Webb, and he has a couple assistant race directors that take care of Moto 2 and Moto 3. We have the FIM safety officer who has predetermined where all our safety aspects have to be on the racetrack. We have Loris Caparossi, the rider representative, and then along with those people that Dorna brings, we have people from the racetrack that sit in that room too. So I have someone who operates the closed circuit television system. I have another person that operates all the light panels that you saw out on the circuit. I have somebody that talks to the track marshals. I have someone that talks to the flag marshals. We have a dispatcher for all the emergency vehicles. So if we have to go pick up a bike and we have to go pick up a rider, they're in touch with the moto taxi and the bike recovery people. And then, of course, I have communication. I have the doctors, the FIM doctor. He's sitting in front of me with the representative, with the doctor representative from the circuit itself, from Circuit of the Americas. And then we have a person that's the timekeeper, and their job is to take and read off. So when you see the 5-minute board go up, there's somebody in that guy's head, in that person's head, telling them, okay, 5-minute board, 3-minute board, when to wave the green flag, all those kinds of things. So it's a pretty busy place with lots of people.
Yeah, I think I mentioned it reminded me of those situation rooms like in Jason Bourne or something where you've got a bunch of different, like legit, a bunch of different screens showing all these different angles and a small army of people reporting it. I can imagine it can get a little hectic. So
it gets a little loud when human like when there's an incident. I mean, it does escalate, and every now and then, we have to remind ourselves with a shush, and the level comes down. But you're invited to race control for the role that you fill because we know your work and your skill set.
Right. So, and then you work with folks out, you guys are kind of sequestered in that race control building, or in that room. But you work with other folks, I believe marshals on the track and then stewards in an adjoining room. Can you tell me about those roles?
Sure. So, the folks out on the racetrack, of course, are the track marshals and the flag marshals, who we have radio contact with. So, when somebody falls, we get a call from them, and the CCTV operator immediately knows which of the many cameras and screens to go to,
Right.
and zooms in, and we can watch the incident from where we pick it up until the bike is on the recovery vehicle and the rider's on the moto taxi, and we can follow it all the way back into the paddock until it's delivered to where it needs to go. And the MotoGP stewards are in a room across the hall from us with all of their equipment. And the MotoGP stewards are the ones that everybody loves to hate. They're the ones that call the slow riding or slow riding online or irresponsible riding and all the track limits. Some of the things are automated. So when you see that we call a track limit on somebody, we actually have fiber optic cable that's embedded to where if that plane is broken, so if that electrical impulse is broken by the tire or by anything, we get a notice, or the stewards get a notice in race control that this has happened. The important thing for everybody to remember is the stewards do not impose any kind of infraction or
Right.
unless they have video backup for it. Every single thing you see, they have video backup for. Obviously, there are a few things that are left up to human decision.
Sure.
But in those cases, there are steps in place if a team wants to appeal a decision that a steward makes. But not everything is appealable. There are certain things that are statements of fact.
Sure.
All right. So
you mentioned that the stewards, kind of the ones that everybody loves to hate, and a lot of the work that you guys do either happens, before the race with a track inspection, or again in that kind of race control room, which is kind of sequestered away from everybody. But what are some things that maybe would surprise people about what you guys all do behind the scenes?
One of the things that each track that MotoGP or World Superbike goes to, the track has to adhere to, or the track becomes homologated.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the homologation process starts well before we're actually on site.
Mm-hmm.
And so the safety officer, the FIM safety officer, has visited the site, has also used technology as far as they'll get drone footage from the different racetracks that they're working with. And the safety officer has a simulator that they study the track with. So the program that they use, you can take and you put the design of the racetrack in, many parameters, and then we can actually study different kinds of crashes.
Oh, wow.
And we, from that, take that information and decide what kind of barriers we might have to use. If we're going to have to use air fence there, if we can use foam blocks there, if we're going to have to add gravel beds there. So the technology beforehand and the information beforehand is the beginning.
Yeah.
The paint, if you think about Coda and all that paint that's out there.
Yeah.
So they used 900 5-gallon buckets.
Wow.
That's how much paint is down on the racetrack there. And that paint is a homologated paint. There are only certain kinds of paint we use because it has to be non-slip.
Right. What makes race weekend so fun for you?
It's a big family reunion. It's amazing to me. We had people at the event this year. We had 12 folks that came from Australia. We had people from the UK, from Mexico, from Argentina, from Czechia, from Canada, Turkey, France, Ukraine, South Africa, Pakistan, Italy, India, from the Netherlands, from Brazil, from the Dominican Republic, and Hungary. So the world is represented. Going, not only with the racing, but also with the group that shows up to keep them safe. For me, at dark 30, as we call it, because our morning meetings on Friday and Saturday start at 5 a.m. And sitting in my car down by race control, looking up turn one, and seeing the flag flying up the top of turn one is a pretty special moment. So that's one of my favorite things about going to COTA, and that special time for me that I get to drive around the racetrack when I need my bright headlights on, and thinking about how many people are going to be coming to that racetrack that day because of what we've all accomplished together. When I walk out into the paddock at the end of the day and I see all the people, or I'm in the airport and I see someone with a T-shirt on from the racetrack, I think, we did that.
Yeah.
They came because we did that.
Well, thank you for putting on such an amazing weekend.
You're welcome.
And as if MotoGP wasn't enough racing for you, this weekend is a 2-for-1, as MotoAmerica's King of the Baggers takes to the track on Friday and Saturday.
Every time they go out there, it amazes me. And I mean, they go faster and faster all the time. And, you know, we've had enough rounds and we've done it for enough years now that it's not like that whole novelty of it is worn off. But to see it in front of the MotoGP crowd and to do what they did today, it just lived up to all of its billing for us, and we're just delighted about that. And that's the bikes, that's the riders. I mean, it's terrific.
That's Sean Bice, content creator for MotoAmerica, one half of the Off Track with Carruthers and Bice podcast, and no stranger to covering road racing. Can you give me some stats on these bikes?
Yeah. First of all, it's a uniquely American series. I don't really call it a civil war, but a little bit, because it's Harley Davidson and Indian Motorcycle, both American brands and American motorcycles. And the rivalry is real between the two factories. It's a pretty big deal. In fact, over the time of King of the Baggers, Harley Davidson has two riders who are paid by the factory, and Kyle Wyman and now James Rispoli. But the bikes they're a little bit different. They're both V-twin 4-stroke engines. The Harley is predominantly air cooled. They call it twin cooled. It's got the exhaust valves are cooled by a little bit of a radiator kind of thing, but the Indian is actually a liquid cooled bike.
Okay.
And it's a little bit more high tech than the Harley engine.
Sure.
And it allows, the rev limits are allowed to be a little bit higher on that engine. So they've kind of balanced things in certain ways for longevity plus performance.
Sure.
And the minimum weight on these bikes is 620 pounds, which a touring motorcycle, and those for instance, a Harley Davidson Road Glide, I think they're over 800 pounds. So they shave like 200 pounds off those things, and they're still big monster bikes. So, but some of the things they can do with lean angles and the speed that they get, I mean, they were doing 185.5 miles an hour top speed at Daytona. So here they were about 170 at COTA. So it's really crazy stuff.
I can't even imagine doing riding a bagger at like 120, much less 160, 180.
Yeah, it's crazy. And that fairing on the front is so big.
Yeah.
That, I mean, not only are they pushing a lot of air, but when they even get next to each other, you know, we haven't had an issue really, but they race pretty close together, but the body works wide on those things. So it's incredible that they race so close like that and don't have catastrophic things happen. But
it's pretty cool. But I mean, the riders are amazing riders. They come from like Superbike and I think Supermoto past and stuff like that.
Yeah. It's exactly what you said. Some of it looked like it was kind of going to be extending the careers for some riders. There was a little bit of age in there, but it's really kind of evolved. Like for instance, this year we have Troy Herfoss, who was a 3-time Australian Superbike champion and a former Supermoto champion in the U.S. way back in the day. So he had some familiarity, but he could race Superbike now. And Kyle Wyman has raced Superbike as recently as a couple of years ago. He was on a Ducati. So he's raced a lot of different kinds of motorcycles too. But these guys now are guys that it's not like, okay, this is what I'm going to do later on in my career. This is an actual alternative to stuff that they could be doing, you know, in the high point of their career. So and they're absolutely all athletes, great shape, you know, and they obviously can handle those bikes. Cracks me up. So I mentioned Kyle Wyman. They don't fall down too often, but when they do, it's 620 pounds of motorcycle. He had crashed in the final turn at Laguna Seca last year. he somehow got that bike back on two wheels by himself.
Wow.
And got on the bike and crossed the finish line to finish the race. So I don't even know how he did it. Cause I mean, that's a lot of weight to lift up.
Yeah. That must be like pure adrenaline or something.
Yeah. I think pure adrenaline, and he must have lifted from his leg, but you saw him. He's not a very big guy.
No, none of them are huge.
No, they're not at all.
Yeah. It's exciting though.
Yeah. It's good stuff.
And then we're here at COTA, and this is a heck of a racetrack.
Sure is.
What makes COTA so special to you?
I mean, for me, obviously, it's a world-class facility. Some of our tracks have character, but they all, some of them aren't really homologated for racing internationally because of certain things about the track. Some of it is the size of the track, the facilities, the infrastructure. COTA happens to be one that they built from the beginning for, I think, essentially Formula One racing, but it turned, MotoGP it's good on. The track's quite unusual because it's got some high-speed straightaways, but it's got, even the riders have commented, it's got a couple of 90-degree turns, which all of a sudden you're going super fast, and there's a turn, that turn one up at the top of the hill, you almost turn back on yourself a little bit. It goes up and then it comes back down.
Yeah, it's like 120 degrees or something.
It's
yeah, and you go uphill and downhill.
Yeah, exactly. So there's elevation change and there's things like that. And I just think it represents us as a country with MotoGP and even with Formula One. And I just think it's cool that we have a track like that the riders go to and drivers from all over the world. So
yeah, and they seem to enjoy it. From all over the world. Too.
Yeah, they do. They do really like it a lot. And I mean, it's got some cool features, like some of the runoff is paved, but it's painted like a flag. So it's just like a real American kind of a look to it and everything. And with Texas being so close to Mexico, they kind of felt like, that's why they call it Circuit of the Americas. And this is called the Red Bull MotoGP of the Americas.
Right.
And they're, because it's so close to South America as well. So, obviously that part of that continent's got some interest. A lot of people come up from here. I mean, obviously Texas isn't too far from Mexico and South America. Right. So it's really kind of, it's not just an American track. It's a continental track, I guess.
Well, let's talk about your podcast a little bit. You interview racers and riders, kind of all over the place.
Yeah, we do.
Do you ever get starstruck when you're interviewing people, or is that kind of in the past?
I mean, it's like, Paul, my partner, the Carruthers and Bice.
Yeah.
He likes to bust on me because I always say, I love that guy, or I love that girl, that rider. I just like all our riders so much, and I just feel that they're so down to earth, and it's kind of the thing about what MotoAmerica is all about. Our paddock is very accessible. You don't have to be. One of the things that's interesting about Formula One is if you've ever watched the races or seen Drive to Survive or anything like that, their drivers are kind of secreted away, and if you get to meet one of them, you can't help but kind of be starstruck just because they're held in that way.
Sure.
And our riders, I'm not saying we don't have stars. We do have stars, but we have stars that are guys that want to meet the fans, and we're much more accessible.
Yeah.
And I think because of that, I feel that way too. I feel like I'm in more access to these riders as well. So plus, I mean, I guess some of it was, we were talking off the air a little bit, our background in radio.
Yeah.
And I'd worked for a couple of ad agencies where we would occasionally work with some, whether it was voice talent or on-air talent. It was, some celebrities. So I learned they're just like us. I mean, they're kind of regular people. And I like to try to bring that out in our riders too, so that people know, when you come to our races, absolutely go up to Jake Gagne or any of our guys and just talk to them. They're just regular guys. They love to have conversations with people. So
yeah. Yeah, that's one of the big impressions that I've got and with all of this, at COTA going on this weekend, is that they're just people.
They're just people.
They're just really good at what they do.
Yeah, I mean, and it's like sometimes it can happen, and you know how this goes sometimes. You can be so good at something that it's hard to be sort of a regular person and be normal.
Sure.
I mean, we see it all the time, prodigies, that it's like, there's some part of their personality that I'm not saying it's missing, but they're so talented in one area. And that is the case with some of these guys. I mean, they have a lot of little idiosyncrasies and things like that about them, but they just have talent that I don't even understand it. I ride a motorcycle. I've been riding for 40 years.
Yeah.
And I've just achieved a certain level of being able to ride around on the streets. I never road raced.
Right.
Mostly because I care so much about the motorcycle. I don't want to crash and wreck it or something.
I feel that. Yeah.
And I even know some of our teams that are, privateers and self-funded. I mean, they feel that way too. If they crash, it really affects their season because, that costs a lot of money, especially with a race bike.
Yeah.
It really is. But no, it's just cool that, they do things that are otherworldly, but yet, they're accessible to the public. So it's one of the things I love about it.
Yeah. Talking about you being a rider, what kind of riding do you like to do?
I'm a street rider for sure. Yeah. I have really never done much off-road stuff. I like motocross and I like supercross. I enjoy it, but I don't know. It's like, I don't really like to get dirty. So I mean, I don't really like to ride in the rain. So I don't really, I'm not really a touring rider either, but I respect these guys that go across the country.
Right.
My feeling sometimes is if I'm gonna be on a motorcycle that long, I'd rather be more comfortable in a car or something.
Sure.
But I do a lot of street riding in my area.
Yeah.
I live in eastern part of Ohio, which most people think Ohio's flat. The eastern side of Ohio is not. It's actually pretty hilly, and it's got some great roads. So I really enjoy that part of it, going out not too far from my house and going on different roads and stuff. And just that feeling of back and forth. I'm not anywhere near where I could surf, but I feel like I would like that surfing as well. So yeah, I just enjoy it for what it is.
Yeah. It's interesting seeing, this cutting edge of motorcycle riding and racing and talent and skill and all that. I think it's easy to forget sometimes you can just go out for a ride just to enjoy it and not have to go do anything crazy. You can just enjoy being on two wheels. So. Yeah.
I mean, it's funny, when I was younger, I'd go to races and I'd be like, I want to be like that guy. I'm going to try, and it's not too cool to do it on the street, but now I admire it. I'm good with it. But then I get a different kind of a feeling when I'm on a motorcycle, that feeling of freedom. And, the thing I love more than anything about a motorcycle is even when you have your helmet on, you can smell everything. You can smell if somebody just mowed their lawn, and it's just, you're just more in touch with what's going on out there.
Yeah. You're immersed in your presence.
Perfect. Yeah.
Exactly
that.
MotoGP at COTA brings out everyone who's anyone in the motorcycle world, including the folks from the Barber Vintage Motorsports Museum who have a few race-winning bikes of their own. So we're sitting here with Brian Case from Barber Vintage Motorsports, and this is kind of a special MotoGP race for you guys at Barber.
It's always special coming to the premier class in motorcycle racing, and so very excited to come here. We're right in Alabama, so it's still just a day's drive from Austin. So we drove 2 days, get here with some bikes from the Barber collection. So that's why I'm here this weekend, and we're celebrating the 75th GP, right? So this is the 75 years of Grand Prix racing.
Right.
And so we thought, well, we've got some Grand Prix bikes in our collection, like Agostini's 67 MV Agusta 500 triple. And we brought John Surtees's 504 from 1956, also an MV. These are, title-winning championship bikes that live in the Barber permanent collection. So we went all the way back to 1949 and looked at what do we have from 1949 on. And, we had a 1953 Carlo Ubiali's MV Little 125. And then, part of that story celebrating world champions, was Kenny Roberts, right? And so we looked at our collection like, well, there was a missing component to the collection in terms of Grand Prix racing, and Kenny Roberts is an American legend. He's an icon.
Yeah,
3-time world champion. Kenny Jr. Won in 2000. World champion, just like his father. 20 years later.
Yeah,
it's just an awesome story. So we started talking with them and convinced them that their story needed to live on and inspire people to come to the museum and learn about that story again. And it's a great American story. And so a couple of their bikes are now in the permanent collection. We brought them here to COTA just to show everybody. But 1980 Yamaha YZR 500, and then Kenny Jr.'s RGV 500 from 2000, both championship title winning bikes. And there's just oozing with, the RGV still has the dust from the track on it. It's as raced. It still has bugs from Brazil on it. They are very special Brazilian bugs. And so it is authenticity galore. And so that kind of stuff excites me at, my age. Those are vintage bikes to me.
Right.
Yeah. That's that 1980 Yamaha with the black and yellow livery. It's just iconic. The picture of him wheeling an Assen. It's an iconic image, and it's also an American store. He's, the first American to win a world championship title. So Kenny Roberts, and that's kind of the rest of my year, right, for Barber Museum, is communicating the Kenny Roberts story, and it's going to culminate in October at our 19th annual Vintage Festival, where Kenny Roberts Sr. will be the Grand Marshal, and we'll have the bikes there running, tuned up. He sent it to us with gas in it. So if that tells you where his mindset is at. So that's going to be quite something to see that 500 two-stroke turning around Barber. Very much looking forward to that. I've seen Kenny ride with my own eyes, and it's unbelievable, and I think everyone needs to see that. So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
and hear it too.
Yeah, so I'm kind of like still living in Cloud 9 right now since becoming the director of Barber Museum in 2023. And so I've got a lot swimming around in my head of where to help guide the museum for the future. It's a giant collection. It's a permanent collection. Everything is owned by the museum. And so it's such an interesting place to celebrate motorsports history, the past, present, and future. And we have a design center that is inspiring generations, future generations, and where motorsports is going, with 3D printing and scanning and all the technology. So that, in addition to the history, all in one place. So, it's been a great year, but it's just getting better. So.
Yeah, and I mean, you've had a heck of a weekend here. You've been able to spend some time with Kenny Roberts. What's that been like? I'm
still processing it. It's only Saturday, and it just keeps getting better. And Junior is he's such an advocate for the sport and the youth in the sport, which is really great. And so we've been talking a lot about that. And his dad, I mean, it's absolutely unbelievable to have grown up watching. These are icons, legends. And so it's been pretty exciting so far.
Yeah, I can tell you're still kind of processing and going through it.
Yes.
What's been kind of your favorite part so far?
I don't know, street tacos with Kenny Roberts.
Casual.
Yeah, it's so simple, but yeah, I value those moments, the downtime, it's pretty cool, because we're at the GP too, so all the latest stuff is going around us, and the technology. I really geek out on all the technology, and it's really interesting to have those conversations with Kenny Sr., who was of the analog era. Right. I mean, kind of the last of that era, and even Junior. Like those bikes are. It's like the last of an era, and it's everything changed, and traction control and tire technology. But that was Kenny Roberts' style, that he, patented. His flat track roots are what he taught generations and generations of riders out there. And now with traction control, it's kind of like bike does a lot of the work.
Sure.
So
sure.
It's very interesting. Hear those stories.
Yeah, and probably interesting to get his perspective on how those things have changed. And I'm sure there's a lot that goes into that.
Yeah.
So, what's been the response like from either people here at COTA or maybe online about Barber being able to showcase these two legendary motorcycles?
Great. It's really great to see the people take notice of, when we pulled the covers off the bikes yesterday, and there's so many iconic images of those bikes, especially the early MVs, right? Because the classic, red and silver livery. I mean, those are the real bikes. They're not replicas. It's as raced in the 50s. So the response is overwhelming, and I really like the newer, like even Kenny Jr.'s 2000 Suzuki. I mean, that's iconic livery, the blue and the yellow, and so it's been great. Like I was saying, this era that we're in is vintage, right? So 1980s on is vintage.
Yeah. Yeah, it's weird thinking about when you grow up and that was the new cutting edge technology, And now you're at a point where it's like, oh, maybe I'm getting old. Maybe I'm the one that's getting old because this stuff doesn't seem that far away, you know?
Well, it's interesting now as director of Barber and this collection. I also have a curatorial hat on too, right?
Sure.
So I'm looking at the whole collection, trying just educate myself on understanding all of the different genres over the years. And what I see a lot of times is these vintage eras repeat. So it goes in cycles. But it's cool to see those trends when you have this broad view of an entire collection.
Yeah, you can see it kind of all truncated in one line.
That's what people see when they walk through the doors at Barber. Most people are overwhelmed. They just their jaws drop. It's like, okay, this is going to take all day.
Right.
And there's just everything's spread out, and you can go anywhere. You can go right up to the bikes, but you see all of that through one lens now. The entire history, 155 plus years of two-wheeled transportation and the motor sport of it, right? As soon as someone was going fast on a single cylinder, whatever, and his buddy had one, that racing was born.
That was it.
That was it. So that was the board track era. Let's just one speed, spark advance. That's it.
See
go
how fast we
racing.
Go. Yeah.
That's when it was born. So at Barber, we try to focus on the motor sport of it. It's not a transportation museum, right? It's the sport. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Real quick, last question. Can we just we know who the Grand Marshal is for Vintage Fest.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit of preview about what we can expect in October?
So Barber Vintage Festival is a huge event. Last year we topped 80,000 people over the weekend, and it's held every year in October. It's October 10th this year. And this year, Kenny Roberts will be the Grand Marshal, and there's all kinds of on-track activities. There's a swap meet with 500 plus vendors in the swap meet. Lots of people come back every year for that. It's a huge swap meet, and it's fun for the whole family. There's a fan zone. There's all kinds of demo rides and tours. There's an off-road park. It's a really great time for the whole family.
In addition to Kenny Roberts Sr. and Jr., you'll also find 1993 MotoGP 500cc world champion and, more importantly, proud Texan Kevin Schwantz, who actually helped design the Circuit of the Americas racetrack. Let's just start at the beginning. How did you even get involved with creating Circuit of the Americas?
I was friends with Tavo Hellman, and Tavo's the one who had the idea. And also a very strong relationship with Bernie Ecclestone. And so Tavo had the opportunity to try and sell Bernie on a race in Texas. And when he got an opportunity to have a contract through Bernie, of course, the sellability of it to someone here in Austin was huge at that point. So I was friends with him, and we started talking about it and kind of a piece of land that he knew of and knew a little bit of the topography about it. Funny enough, the first little sketches of it were on a bar napkin, and so just kind of progressed from there. Really, my job or my input there was to try and keep the FIA from making it a car only track.
Okay.
To build some safety into it for motorcycles as well, so that it could be more than just a car track or just an F1 track, either one. But there was a couple things in tracks that I've really liked. One was Hockenheim coming back into the stadium. I swear, even with earplugs in and sitting right on top of a 500 two-stroke, I could still hear the crowd every time you came into the stadium. And then there was a big braking area getting in there. There was 3 really tight technical corners, similar to the layout that there is from 13 to 15. 12 off the back straightaway to 15 at COTA. And that was one of the sections of the track that I feel like was kind of based strictly on what I had as far as input. Tavo had 16, 17, and 18. Felt like that was, I think at the time, was it Istanbul that has a big, huge sequence of corners where a car comes out of a tight turn and just builds speed all the way through it, and then from turn 3 to 6, Beckett's, Maggots type Silverstone layout.
Mm-hmm.
So just piecing together some of the favorite stuff he'd ever driven around, some of the favorite stuff I had ever ridden around, and an extra eye there on my behalf for safety. You know, at the bottom of turn 2, they wanted a guardrail right against the track. I was like, you guys got to be kidding me. You know, and on the outside edge, I said, we can't have that.
Yeah.
But, you know, the great thing about it is, I think until, you know, about the 6th or 7th year of racing, I don't think anybody ever even got to any of the safe barrier that's there. You know, turn 2, Crutchlow finally got out, and I think his bike hit the barrier. I don't think he did.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, otherwise runoff is ample. You can make a mistake going into those S's and just, you know, either get a time penalty because you cut the track, or there's a lot of spots that are really forgiving there. And from a motorcycle standpoint, I think the challenging part of it is it's got absolutely everything on it.
Yeah.
You know, it's got fast direction changes. It's got tight technical lefts and rights, first and second gear stuff, you know, where you can just immediately alter your line getting into 15 and stuff somebody right up the inside. If he stays on his racing line in front, you got him. You know, you got to be defensive a lot too, which, you know, really comes into play. The braking going up the hill into 1, I kind of saw it in my initial thoughts about it. I saw it as a steady incline all the way to the apex. I didn't see it getting up and tapering off. But, you know, between Tavo and Tilke and myself, I think we came up with a pretty good piece.
Yeah, that was what I was kind of most taken aback by. In the MotoGP race, I was on the inner ring, and right there at the apex of turn 1, and seeing people come, you know, all the way up the hill, and then just take that tight turn. It's probably 120 degrees, and then
something like that.
And then downhill. I mean, that was blown away by that.
Yeah, and I think maybe not on a MotoGP bike, but in a car,
mm-hmm.
when they make that turn at the top of the hill, they're flat until I think it's turn 4. They get around to flat out, and then into the S's. And I think it's before they come back for the second one, before a car even thinks about lifting the throttle. You know, and it's absolutely a challenge on a bike too. I did a little bit of superbike testing before I raced the 8-hour 10 years ago. And it makes your eyes open up. That's for sure. Down the bottom of 2.
Well, what's it like riding your own track after you've designed it?
You know, it's like I said, it's got everything. It's got tight. It's got technical. It's got fast. It's got hard braking. You know, a lot of tracks don't have all that kind of stuff. And for a rider, it physically, I think I heard him say again in some of the commentary, I heard him say it's one of the most physically challenging tracks that there is out there on the calendar. You know, and it's for me to get to ride it. Yeah, it was. You know, to me, it was another track that I needed to figure out how to get around. I don't think I really thought a lot about it being something that I had designed or had input in. You know, and Epstein, Mr. Epstein, who since took over the project, has done a great job getting the place to where it is. I mean, whole lot difference than drawing something up on a napkin and saying, hey, this would be a great track, to actually getting it built. And between he and the guys at Tilke, the architect, the German architect company that did a lot of the work on it, I think they did an outstanding job. Everybody I know that goes is like, man, that is one great facility.
Oh, yeah. Can you tell me about the length of the course?
You know, it's complete random luck that it turned out to be 3.41 miles.
And what's the significance of that?
Well, my racing number was 34. And actually, the number of pit boxes is 34, too.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. So,
yeah. No, there's a whole bunch of stuff and I think the pit boxes just was on what the length to the front straightaway was and what they did with the media center. And, you know, it wasn't we need to have, I think you have to have at least a certain number, but I think, you know, the random number of 34 on boxes was just blind luck too.
Well, I could think of a lot worse numbers than 34. So yeah, 34, yeah. That's a happy coincidence, right?
It really is. Every time you hear somebody mention that or bring that up, it's pretty cool.
You mentioned that a lot of people say it's a really, you know, challenging course in a good way, but what's maybe the biggest compliment that sticks out in your head that someone's given you about the track?
Yeah, just the safety of it.
Mm-hmm.
To see something new built that you don't immediately have to put a chicane in somewhere to try and slow something down to make it safe enough to race on. I think the Red Bull ring, first thing they did was they built it. Well, okay, but hold on. Now we have to make some changes to it because this corner is no good. And that corner, we haven't had to make any real significant changes to the track. Some surface stuff, but I mean, that's just the soil that's underneath the track that's going to make it be a little bit more high maintenance than most. And that's about it. Just hearing the guys all say safety, you don't really have to concern yourself with a wall that's anywhere at any place on the racetrack.
Yeah, it sounds like really. I mean, obviously, as a motorcycle, as a motorcycle rider or racer, you have completely different considerations than if you're racing or driving in a car. And I think when you can focus on racing rather than being, necessarily have to worry about whether the track is safe or not, you can probably ride a much better race.
Oh, for sure. And what's funny about it is, as a rider, you really don't. I mean, if you're on your game, you're looking at what's paved and what's in front of you. You're not looking at what's going to happen if something goes wrong.
Yeah.
You're so focused. My example is Japan used to be one of my favorite racetracks. And in 95, that was the last Grand Prix I ever rode. And when I rode there in the rain in 95, I was riding around looking how close the guardrail was. Like, oh my God, because you're not focused on being the best that you can be. You're focused on what's going to happen, because I'm not just 100% confident in what I'm doing. I was a little bit injured at the time. I had a bad 94, a tough winter testing in 94 going into 95. And I was riding around there like I was, just looking for a place to lay down.
Did you have the idea for the observation tower, or was that somebody else?
No, that was completely, that was neither Tavo or mine's idea. That was strictly a Mr. Epstein thing. But it's turned out to be such a thing that everybody, I want to go up in it. It's just like the Ferris wheel at Suzuka. It's like, everybody, I want to go get in the Ferris wheel, ride around, and give you 30 minutes to look at the racetrack and what all's around it. So it's a pretty cool place.
Yeah, it was super cool to go up there and kind of get a full view, and being able to see all the excitement from up there was super cool. I remember when I first was kind of riding up, I go, is that like a ride or a roller coaster or something? I had no idea what it was. So it's definitely iconic there at COTA. So
did you walk out on the glass?
Oh yeah. I took a picture, and then I went out to the railing, and I held on a little bit, and it was a little windy and it was swaying. I was like, all right, I'm sure this is safe, but
Yeah.
So
I've done several interviews up there, and they're like, okay, can you just back up to the rail? I was like, no, I can't. You're right.
Yeah, not going to do that. So what makes COTA such a special and great track to you?
Well, one, it's the fact that it's here in my home state, the fact that I was somewhat instrumental in getting MotoGP to the venue. For me, that's pretty special. The fact that it's as big a facility as it is, and how well it races. It's one of those places that sometimes, if somebody's got, like Marquez just dominated the place for years, somebody gets it figured out. And because there's so many different aspects of it, there's, I used to be able to get my bike to do 2 of 3 or 4 things good. And then the other 2 or 3, you just had to kind of hold on and get what you could in those corners of those sections of racetrack. This kind of place would have really been tough on me and my Suzuki, I think.
And as for the MotoGP race itself, everyone says it was a race for the books. Marc Marquez, who's called the king of COTA since he's won here almost more times than he can count on 2 hands, went into turn 1 and passed Jorge Martin, then crashed a minute later. And then Maverick Vinales, who started in 8th place, ended up winning the whole thing, which I don't think anybody had on their bingo card. And we can't do it justice enough here, so we'll leave a link to some of the highlights in the show notes. But in any case, Dennis Noyes is right. There's nothing like a MotoGP race. And you really get to appreciate how fast 200 plus miles per hour actually is when you're there in person. To hear it, to see it, to smell it. And it's insane how close these racers get to each other while they're dragging an elbow around a corner. And more importantly, you get to immerse yourself in a place where people from literally all over the world come out to enjoy because of their love for all things motorcycles. So one of these days, you've got to get out to a MotoGP race. And you'd really be hard-pressed to find a better track than Circuit of the Americas. Thanks for listening to this special episode of Driven to Ride. Huge thanks to Dorna for giving us access to the race, and thanks to Guillermo with RiderShare for the Kawasaki Vulcan to ride over the weekend. Another big thank you goes out to Matthew Miles. Without him, this episode would not be possible. Thanks for listening to Driven to Ride. Interact with us and check out full unedited conversations, photos, interviews, video interviews, plus other goodies on YouTube or Instagram at Driven to Ride Podcast. Or you can check us out at driventoridepodcast.com. And make sure you leave us a rating and review from wherever you get your podcasts, too. Do you have an idea for an episode or a guest, or you want to invite us out on an adventure? Email us, hello@driventoridepodcast.com. Driven to Ride is wholly owned by Flint Rock LLC, made possible with help from Matthew Miles, and written, hosted, and produced by me, Mark Long. We'll see you out there.